The sterile air of the courtroom crackled with a tension so thick you could taste the bitterness. On one side sat Emily, a woman hollowed out by grief and betrayal. On the other, her husband, Marcus, and his new woman, Chloe, the mistress. Chloe, holding a newborn baby, looked back at the wife and gave a slow, deliberate smirk. It was a look of total victory. She had the man, the money, and the child. The hearing was just a formality, but as the judge began to read the results of a simple DNA test, that victorious smirk would soon curdle into a mask of pure, unadulterated horror. The fluorescent lights of family courtroom 3B hummed a low, agonizing note, a soundtrack to the complete disintegration of Emily Miller's life. She sat bolt upright, her spine rigid, hands clasped so tightly in her lap her knuckles were white. She was the very picture of composure, a marble statue carved from ice, but inside she was vibrating apart. Across the aisle sat her husband, soon-to-be ex-husband, Marcus Thorne. He was exactly as she remembered, and exactly as he always was, impeccable. His custom charcoal suit, rumoured to cost more than her car, hung perfectly on his broad shoulders. His dark hair was styled with calculated indifference. He wasn't just wealthy, he was powerful, and the entire room felt the weight of his presence. But it wasn't Marcus who held Emily's gaze. It was the woman sitting just behind him, in the row reserved for close family. Chloe Bennett. She was everything Emily was not. Where Emily was classic, quiet elegance, Chloe was loud, vibrant, and dripping with new money. Her blonde hair was aggressively bright, her makeup flawless, her dress a shade of crimson that screamed for attention. And in her arms, wrapped in a cashmere blanket, was the baby. The prize. The reason they were all here. A tiny, sleeping infant named Leo. Marcus's lawyer, a silver-haired shark named Jonathan Kincaid, was speaking. His voice was a smooth, baritone weapon, and it was aimed directly at Emily. And so, Your Honour, we are not merely petitioning for the finalization of this divorce. We are petitioning for a permanent restraining order. Ms. Miller's behaviour has become erratic, obsessive, and poses a direct threat to the well-being of my client and his new family. A quiet murmur rippled through the few observers in the gallery. Erratic, obsessive. The words were designed to paint her as unhinged, a crazy ex-wife. Emily's own lawyer, a young but fiercely intelligent woman named Sarah Jenkins, placed a steadying hand on her arm. "Breathe, Emily," she whispered. "This is what they do. They're building a narrative." Kincaid continued. "Ms. Miller has been unable to accept the end of her marriage. Understandable, perhaps, but her actions have escalated. She has been seen near my client's home. She has made repeated, harassing calls. But most concerning, she has made baseless, delusional claims about the child, Leo Thorne." Emily's eyes flickered to the baby. "Her baby." "No," she corrected herself. "That's what they say is delusional." "The truth, Your Honour," Kincaid said, his voice dripping with false sympathy, "is that Ms. Miller is tragically unable to cope with her own infertility. And now she has fixated on the child my client was blessed to have with Ms. Bennett." This was the killing blow. The public mention of her infertility felt like a physical assault. Emily flinched, the marble statue cracking. She remembered the years of sterile clinics, the invasive procedures, the crushing monthly grief. She remembered Marcus, at first supportive, then impatient, then cold. His disappointment in her failure, had become a tangible thing in their marriage, a cold wall between them. And then she had gotten pregnant. Chloe Bennett, a 25-year-old assistant from his office. It had happened so fast. One day, Marcus was complaining about her obsession with IVF. The next, he was announcing he was leaving. "She's pregnant, Emily," he had said, not with apology, but with a strange, triumphant finality. "It just happened. It's a miracle. A miracle. Their years of trying, their careful planning, their tens of thousands of dollars, all of that was a failure. This affair, this betrayal, was a miracle. Now in the courtroom, Chloe leaned forward, her red-painted lips close to Marcus's ear. She whispered something. Marcus's stony expression broke for a split second, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. He nodded, a small, arrogant dip of his chin. Then, Chloe did it. She turned her head, just slightly, and her eyes met Emily's across the aisle. She didn't look away. She held Emily's gaze, and a slow, sickeningly sweet smirk spread across her perfect face. It was not a smile of happiness. It was a smile of conquest. It said, "I won. I took your husband. I took your life. I even took the one thing you wanted most in the world, a child. And now I'm going to take the rest of your dignity. You are nothing." Emily's breath hitched. The blood roared in her ears. The room tilted. "Ms. Jenkins?" The judge's voice cut through the haze. "Your response?" Judge Aniston was a no-nonsense woman in her late 50s, known for her sharp mind and her inability to suffer fools. She was looking at Emily with a practiced neutrality, but beneath it, Emily could see the faintest trace of pity. Pity. The last thing she wanted. Sarah Jenkins stood up, her small stature belying the steel in her voice. "Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Kincaid has painted a very creative picture of my client, a picture of a woman unhinged by jealousy." "Objection," Kincaid snapped. "Counsel is characterizing." "Sustained," the judge said. "Get to the point, Miss Jenkins." "My point, Your Honor," Sarah said, her voice clear and ringing, "is that my client is not delusional. She is not obsessed. She is, however, the victim of a crime so monstrous, so calculating, that we were hesitant to believe it ourselves." Marcus scoffed, actually scoffed, a short, sharp sound of derision. "Mr. Kincaid claims my client is fixated on this child," Sarah continued, her voice rising. "He is correct. She is. But not for the reasons he implies." Sarah held up a single document. "Your Honor, my client has spent the last 5 years of her life trying to conceive a child. She and Mr. Thorne underwent multiple rounds of IVF at the Harrison Fertility Institute. They were successful in creating several viable embryos that were, by law, joint property." Kincaid was on his feet. "Your Honor, this is irrelevant. This is a painful, private matter. Miss Jenkins is just trying to harass my client and Miss Bennett." "It is supremely relevant, Your Honor," Sarah countered, her voice sharp as a razor, "because Mr. Kincaid, Mr. Thorne, and Miss Bennett have built their entire case on the premise that baby Leo is the biological child of Marcus Thorne and Chloe Bennett." "He is!" Chloe suddenly cried out from the gallery, her voice a shrill contrast to the legal sparring. "I gave birth to him. I have the birth certificate. She's just jealous." "Miss Bennett, you will be silent, or I will have you removed," Judge Aniston warned, her gavel striking the wood once. Crack. Chloe shrank back, but the smirk, though dimmed, was still there, now laced with indignation. "Your Honor," Sarah said, letting the silence settle, "we have reason to believe that Chloe Bennett, while she may have given birth to the child, is not his biological mother." The courtroom went utterly silent. Kincaid froze, his mouth half open. Marcus's mask of cool indifference finally slipped. He stared at Sarah Jenkins, his eyes wide with something Emily had never seen in him before. Fear. "This is preposterous," Kincaid finally stammered. "An outlandish, desperate accusation." "Is it?" Sarah asked. "If it's so preposterous, then they should have no problem agreeing to our motion. Your Honor, we formally request a court-ordered, expedited maternity and paternity test for the infant, Leo Thorne." The smirk was gone. Chloe's face was now a pale, confused mask. She looked at Marcus, her eyes asking a question. But Marcus was staring at Emily, his gaze dark and unreadable. Emily met his stare. The ice was starting to melt, replaced by a slow, burning fire. She gave him a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. "It's over, Marcus." Judge Aniston looked from Sarah to Kincaid. "Mr. Kincaid, your client's response to the motion for a DNA test?" Kincaid was scrambling. "Your Honor, this is an insult. It's a stall tactic. We have a birth certificate. We have witnesses. This is—" "Is that a no?" the judge interrupted. "Because, Counselor, you just spent 10 minutes painting Ms. Miller as delusional. A simple test would seem the fastest way to prove that. Unless, of course, you have something to hide." The trap was set. The air was thick. Chloe's smirk was dead and gone, replaced by the first creeping shadow of doubt. Jonathan Kincaid was a shark, but even sharks can be outmaneuvered. He was trapped, and he knew it. To refuse the DNA test now, after painting Emily as delusional, would be a massive red flag to a judge as sharp as Aniston. It would be tantamount to admitting that Sarah Jenkins's outlandish claim had merit. He glanced at Marcus, who gave a short, almost invisible shake of his head. "Fight it." Kincaid took a deep breath, reassembling his professional indignation. "Your Honor, we do not have something to hide. We are simply trying to protect a newborn child and his mother from the vindictive fantasies of a scorned woman. This request is invasive, unnecessary, and emotionally damaging." "What's emotionally damaging?" Sarah shot back. "Is being told you're insane for suspecting your husband stole your biological property." "We aren't guessing, Your Honor. We have evidence." "Then present it," Kincaid challenged. "I'd be happy to," Sarah said, "but it involves the medical records of a third party, the Harrison Fertility Institute. I believe it would be much faster and cleaner to simply prove our case with the test. If we are wrong, my client will drop all further claims and agree to the restraining order immediately." It was a brilliant gamble. Emily felt her heart pound. She was offering them everything, a total surrender, if she was wrong. Judge Aniston leaned forward, her eyes fixed on Marcus and Chloe. "Mr. Thorne, Ms. Bennett, your lawyer is arguing on your behalf, but I want to hear from you. Do you object to a simple cheek swab to prove your parentage and put this entire messy affair to rest?" Marcus Thorne, a man who commanded boardrooms and silenced opponents with a single glare, hesitated. His silence was deafening. It was Chloe who spoke, her voice trembling with a renewed, tearful rage. "Your Honor, I don't understand why this is happening. I carried Leo for 9 months. I went through 18 hours of labor. He is my son. This is humiliating. She's trying to take my baby." She began to cry, great, heaving sobs that were perfectly timed. The cashmere blanket shifted, and the baby, disturbed, let out a small cry. Chloe rocked him, kissing his forehead, playing the part of the devoted mother under attack. "Please, don't let her do this. It's just cruel." Emily watched the performance, disgusted. It was good. It was very good. Chloe looked like the victim, a new mother being harassed in court by her partner's barren ex-wife. The optics were terrible for Emily. "I understand this is upsetting, Ms. Bennett," Judge Aniston said, her voice softening slightly. "But Ms. Jenkins has made a very serious allegation, and she has, in effect, wagered her entire case on this one point. The court has a duty to establish clear-minded facts, especially where a minor is involved." She turned to Kincaid. "The court orders it. Paternity and maternity. I want a court-appointed technician from Global Diagnostics here within the hour. We will take the samples, and we will recess until the results are expedited. That should be 48 hours. We will reconvene Friday at 10 good a.m. In the meantime, the temporary restraining order against Ms. Miller stands. But Mr. Thorne, you and Miss Bennet are not to leave the jurisdiction." It was a partial victory for Emily, but it felt hollow. She still had to endure 48 more hours of being labelled a harasser. As the judge slammed the gavel, the courtroom dissolved into movement. Kincaid was furiously whispering to Marcus. Marcus, his face a mask of thunder, grabbed Chloe's arm, his fingers digging into her bicep. "Not here," he hissed, his voice low and dangerous. Emily and Sarah stood, gathering their briefcases. As they turned to leave, they found their path blocked by Chloe, who had stood up to adjust the baby. She had to step aside to let them pass. As Emily drew level with her, Chloe, her eyes still red from her crocodile tears, leaned in close. Her voice was a venomous whisper, for Emily's ears only. "You really are pathetic. You know that?" Chloe breathed, the smell of her expensive perfume washing over Emily. "You just can't stand to see him happy. You couldn't give him a child, so now you want to steal mine. Is that it?" "He's not your child," Emily said, her voice a low, trembling blade. Chloe laughed. It was a cold, ugly sound. "Right, I just—" "What? Found him under a cabbage patch? I went through hell to have this baby. He is mine. And in 2 days, when that stupid test comes back, I am going to personally watch as they serve you with papers that will ensure you never come within 500 feet of my family again." She adjusted the baby in her arms, a look of profound ownership on her face. "You should have just accepted the settlement, Emily. Now you're going to lose everything and your dignity." She brushed past Emily, her shoulder deliberately knocking into Emily's. Emily stumbled, steadying herself on the wooden bench. She watched them go, Marcus striding ahead, Kincaid rushing to keep up, and Chloe following, swaying her hips, the triumphant Madonna. "Don't let her get to you," Sarah said, guiding Emily toward the exit. "She's terrified. That was a performance for a woman who just realized she's walked into a trap she doesn't understand." "What if we're wrong, Sarah?" Emily whispered, as they stepped into the sterile hallway, the courtroom doors swinging shut behind them. "What if it's all a coincidence? What if I am just delusional?" "We're not wrong," Sarah said, her certainty a lifeline. "Now come on, we have 48 hours. They think we're waiting for a DNA result. We're going to be building a criminal case." Emily nodded. The last 2 days had been about suspicion. The next 2 would be about war. The next 48 hours were a blur of adrenaline, caffeine, and agonizing suspense. Emily and Sarah didn't just wait by the phone. They worked. They set up a command center in Sarah's small, cluttered law office, the walls covered in whiteboards. "Okay," Sarah said, uncapping a red marker. "They think we're just waiting on a DNA test. They think it's our word against theirs. They have no idea what we've been doing for the last 2 months." The story, the real story, hadn't begun with the divorce papers. It had begun 3 months ago at the Harrison Fertility Institute. Emily, shattered by Marcus's departure and the news of Chloe's miracle pregnancy, had gone to the clinic to discuss her options. She still had 3 viable, frozen embryos. They were her last hope. She had thought, perhaps, she could pursue single motherhood. She was prepared to fight Marcus for custody of them in the divorce. She had met with the Institute's director, Dr. Evelyn Hayes, a woman who had always been a beacon of calm, professional hope. That day, however, Dr. Hayes had been off. She was pale, her hands visibly shaking. "Emily, I have some terrible news," Dr. Hayes had said, refusing to meet her eyes. "There was an incident, a cryogenic malfunction, a storage tank. It failed." Emily's blood had run cold. What do you mean?" "Your embryos, all 3. They're gone, non-viable. I am so sorry. It was a terrible, tragic accident." Emily hadn't cried. She hadn't screamed. She had simply gone numb. It was the final, cruel joke in a life full of them. Her husband had left her, and now her last chance at a biological child had been destroyed. She'd stumbled out of the clinic in a daze. But as the numbness faded, questions began to surface. A single tank failure? Just hers? And the timing. It was too convenient. Marcus leaves, Chloe is pregnant, and Emily's embryos are accidentally destroyed. It felt less like a tragedy and more like a clean-up. That's when she had hired Miles Corbin. Corbin was a private investigator, a former cop with tired eyes and a relentless attitude. He was expensive, but Emily didn't care. She'd sold her grandmother's jewelry to pay his retainer. "What am I looking for?" he'd asked, sipping stale coffee in his cramped office. "I don't know," Emily had admitted. "I just know that my husband is a liar, and his mistress's pregnancy. It feels wrong, and my embryos are gone." Corbin had started digging, and what he found was damning. First, Chloe Bennett. For a woman who was supposedly 9 months pregnant, there was almost no record of it. No fawning social media posts, which was odd for a woman like Chloe. Corbin's pretext calls to local OB/GYN offices came up empty. It was as if she hadn't had a single prenatal appointment until her 7th month, when she suddenly appeared in the system of a high-end, exclusive birthing centre. Then, Dr. Evelyn Hayes, the beacon of hope, was in trouble. Serious trouble. She was being sued by 2 other couples for mishandling embryos. She had recently purchased a condo in the Bahamas, in cash, an odd purchase for a clinic director on a reported salary. But the smoking gun had come from Marcus's finances. Corbin, through a source Emily didn't ask questions about, had gotten access to Marcus's private bank records. 2 days after Emily's embryos were destroyed, there was a wire transfer. A single transfer of $500,000 from an offshore shell corporation owned by Marcus Thorne to another offshore shell corporation. This one, Corbin had traced back to Dr. Evelyn Hayes. "He didn't just cheat on you, Ms. Miller," Corbin had said, laying the printouts on her dining room table. "He paid the doctor to destroy your embryos. That's your grounds for a lawsuit right there. Malicious destruction of property, emotional distress. We can nail him." But Emily had stared at the dates. "He paid after they were destroyed." "No, that's not right. He wasn't paying for their destruction, Miles. He was paying for their delivery." A new, horrifying theory began to form. "Check the dates again," Emily had urged. "The transfer was 2 days after my embryos died." But Chloe announced her pregnancy. She would have been about 8 weeks along at that point. Corbin had looked confused. "So, the embryos were implanted before I was told they were gone," Emily breathed. "The $500,000 wasn't the initial payment. It was the final payment. The job's done payment." "Implanted into who?" "Chloe," Emily whispered, the word tasting like ash. "He didn't just get his mistress pregnant. He took my embryo, our embryo, and had it implanted in her. He stole my baby. It was monstrous. It was diabolical. And it was pure Marcus. Why leave his barren wife and hope his new mistress could conceive? Why not guarantee it? Why not take the embryo he already had, implant it in the new woman, and create his miracle family, cutting Emily out of the picture entirely? He would get the child, divorce the wife, and Chloe would be the mother. He had used Chloe as an incubator. Now, in Sarah's office, they laid it all out. "Kincaid and Marcus are arrogant," Sarah said, pacing. "They believe this is an unprovable, he said, she said. They are relying on the birth certificate. They are relying on the fact that Chloe physically gave birth. They believe possession is 9/10 of the law." "But they don't know about the money," Emily said. "They don't know we have the wire transfer." "Exactly, and they don't know what I just got." Sarah grinned, a feral, triumphant expression. She held up a new document, a sworn affidavit. "What is that?" "It's from Dr. Evelyn Hayes," Sarah said. Emily's jaw dropped. "How?" "Mr. Corbin and I paid her a visit last night. We presented her with the wire transfer record. We explained that she was an accomplice to felony theft, conspiracy, and medical fraud. We explained that Marcus Thorne was going to throw her under the bus the second this blew up. We offered her a one-time only deal. Come clean, testify against Marcus, and we would recommend leniency to the DA and the medical board. She's a rat, Emily, and rats always flee a sinking ship." Sarah slapped the affidavit onto the desk. "It's all in here. Marcus approached her. He offered her $500,000 to solve his problem. He wanted Emily's embryos. He said they were his property, and he wanted to protect his lineage. Dr. Hayes transferred one viable embryo to Chloe Bennett at a private, unregistered surgical suite. She faked the cryogenic malfunction records. It's a full confession." Emily was crying, silent tears of rage, and, for the first time, relief. "So, we have him. We have him," Sarah confirmed. "The DNA test is just the spark. This affidavit is the wildfire." The phone on Sarah's desk rang. Both women jumped. It was Thursday night, 24 hours before the hearing. Sarah put it on speaker. "Ms. Jenkins." "Sarah, it's Miles. You're not going to believe this." "What is it?" "Our boy Marcus is getting nervous. He just made a call, a very interesting call, to a man named Dr. Peter Walsh." "Who is Dr. Walsh?" Emily asked. "He's the head of laboratory operations at Global Diagnostics," Miles said. "The lab doing the DNA test." Sarah's eyes widened. "He's trying to tamper with the results. He's trying to bribe the lab." "Looks like it," Miles said. "I've got a man watching Walsh's house. But this just moved from fraud to felony witness tampering. He's desperate." "Let him try," Sarah said, a cold smile touching her lips. "Let him think he can buy his way out. He's just digging his own grave deeper." She hung up the phone and looked at Emily. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow, we end this." Emily didn't sleep. She sat by her window, watching the city lights, her hand resting on her flat stomach. For the first time in 5 years, she didn't feel empty. She felt like a mother whose child had been stolen. And tomorrow, she was going to get him back. Friday, 10:00 a.m. The return to courtroom 3B was vastly different. The air of quiet tension was gone, replaced by an electric, almost giddy sense of dread. The gallery was packed. News of the sensational, stolen embryo accusation had leaked. Reporters lined the back benches, notebooks and pens at the ready. Emily and Sarah walked in first. Emily wore a simple, navy blue dress. She was no longer the trembling victim. She was a woman on a mission, her eyes clear and locked on the judge's bench. Then, Marcus's team entered. Marcus himself looked strained. The impeccable mask was still there, but his eyes were bloodshot. He had clearly not slept. Kincaid, his lawyer, looked furious, his briefcase clutched in a white-knuckled grip. And then came Chloe. If she had been the triumphant Madonna before, today she was the martyr. She was dressed in pale, virginal white. Her makeup was subtle, her eyes wide and fearful. She clutched baby Leo to her chest, as if a physical attempt to snatch him was imminent. She sat down, and her eyes immediately found Emily. But this time there was no smirk. There was only pure, unadulterated hatred. All rise. Judge Aniston entered, her face an unreadable slab of granite. She sat, adjusted her robes, and looked down at the documents before her. "We are reconvened in the matter of Thorne versus Thorne," the judge said, her voice cutting through the silence. 2 days ago, this court ordered expedited DNA tests for paternity and maternity of the infant, Leo Thorne. I have the certified, sealed results from Global Diagnostics, case number 774B. A court officer handed her a thick manila envelope. The judge picked up a letter opener and slit it open. She pulled out a multi-page report, her eyes scanning the summary page. Emily's heart was a drum against her ribs. Please be right. Marcus was staring at the judge, so intently it looked like he was trying to bend her to his will. Kincaid was shuffling papers, pretending to be unconcerned, and Chloe was rocking her baby, her eyes squeezed shut, whispering to him. "Very well," Judge Aniston said, her voice flat. "The court has its answers." She looked at Kincaid. "Mr. Kincaid, you argued forcefully that this was a vindictive fantasy. You may want to prepare your notes." Kincaid's head snapped up. The judge continued. "First, the paternity test for Mr. Marcus Thorne." She paused. The silence stretched for a full, agonizing 10 seconds. "The results confirm," she said, "that Mr. Marcus Thorne is the biological father of the infant, Leo Thorne. The probability of paternity is 99.99999%. A wave of relief washed over Marcus. He visibly sagged, a sharp exhale escaping his lips. And Chloe's eyes flew open. The fear vanished, replaced instantly by that old, familiar, soul-crushing arrogance. She looked at Marcus, her face shining with, "I told you so," relief. He was the father. It was his baby. And then she turned. She looked straight at Emily. The smirk was back. It was bigger this time. It was a full, triumphant, venomous grin. It was a smile that said, "You lunatic. You dragged me through this. You humiliated me. And you were wrong. It's over. You're finished." She even gave a tiny dismissive shake of her head, as if to say, "Poor crazy Emily." Emily just stared back. She didn't flinch. She didn't cry. She just waited. "However," Judge Aniston said, her voice dropping an octave, becoming infinitely more dangerous, "that is not the only test we ran." Chloe's smile froze, stuck on her face like a grotesque mask. "We also ran the maternity test, as requested by the respondent." The judge stared directly at Chloe Bennett. The courtroom was so quiet, Emily could hear the scratching of a reporter's pen from the back row. The test was run comparing the infant's DNA to that of the woman who, according to the birth certificate, is his mother. Judge Aniston let the silence hang again, her gaze sweeping from Chloe to Marcus and then to Kincaid. "The results are conclusive," the judge declared, her voice booming in the small room. "Ms. Chloe Bennett is excluded as the biological mother of the child." The words hit the room like a physical blow. Excluded! Chloe's frozen smirk shattered, her face contorted into a mask of pure, uncomprehending shock. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. "What?" she finally choked out, a small, strangled sound. "No, that's impossible. That's a lie." Kincaid was on his feet, his face ashen. "Your Honor, this is grounds for an immediate appeal. The lab has made a catastrophic error. This is impossible. We have a birth certificate. She gave birth to the child. This is—" "Sit down, Mr. Kincaid," Judge Aniston roared, her fury absolute. "You will not imply this court is using faulty data. The test is conclusive. Ms. Bennett is not the mother." But... Chloe was hyperventilating, her eyes darting between Marcus and the judge. I carried him. I felt him kick. He's my son." "This is indeed a fascinating development," Sarah Jenkins said, standing up calmly, her voice cutting through Chloe's hysterics. "A woman gives birth to a baby that is not biologically hers. It does beg the question, doesn't it?" Sarah held up a second sealed envelope, identical to the one the judge had opened. "Your Honor, anticipating this exact outcome, and Mr. Thorne's inevitable accusations of a lab error, my client, Miss Emily Miller, also provided her DNA to Global Diagnostics yesterday for comparison." Marcus Thorne went from pale to a sickly, greenish grey. He looked like he was going to be physically ill. He knew, in that instant, that the game was over. "We ordered a separate binding maternity test," Sarah said, handing the envelope to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. To be opened only if the first test excluded Miss Bennet. Judge Aniston took the envelope. She didn't need the letter opener. She tore it open with her bare hands. She read the single page inside. Her eyes widened, just slightly. She looked up, over the rims of her glasses, and her gaze was so filled with contempt as it landed on Marcus Thorne that he visibly recoiled. She held the paper up. "According to this certified report," the judge said, her voice shaking with barely suppressed rage, "the probability of maternity between the infant, Leo, and Ms. Emily Miller is 99.99%. A collective, massive gasp sucked the air from the room. Chloe Bennet let out a sound. It was not a word. It was a high-pitched, animalistic shriek of denial that clawed at the ears. "No, no, no, liar, liar! She paid you! She's a witch! He's mine! He's my baby!" Emily simply closed her eyes, and for the first time in a year, a single hot tear of pure, unadulterated relief slid down her cheek. "He's mine!" The courtroom exploded into chaos. Chloe's shriek echoed off the wooden walls as she lunged to her feet, clutching the baby so tightly he began to wail. "You can't have him! He's mine! I'm his mother!" "Bailiff, restrain Miss Bennet," Judge Aniston commanded. "Gently. Do not harm the child." Two officers moved toward Chloe, who recoiled, holding the baby like a shield. "Get away from me! Get away from her! Marcus, tell them she's lying. Marcus." But Marcus Thorne was a broken man. He had sunk back into his chair, his hands covering his face. His shoulders were shaking. He was a king whose castle had just been reduced to dust. He said nothing. "Your Honor!" Kincaid was shouting, trying to regain control. "This is a set-up. This is a conspiracy by the respondent. We demand a retest. We demand a different lab." "A conspiracy, Mr. Kincaid?" Sarah Jenkins's voice sliced through the noise, silencing the room. Oh, there was a conspiracy, all right. But my client wasn't the perpetrator. She was the victim. She turned to face the gallery, to the reporters who were scribbling furiously. My client, Emily Miller, and her husband, Marcus Thorne, had embryos at the Harrison Fertility Institute. My client was told, 3 months ago, that those embryos were accidentally destroyed. This was a lie. She pointed a finger directly at Marcus. This man, Marcus Thorne, conspired with the clinic's director, Dr. Evelyn Hayes, to steal his wife's biological property. He paid $500,000 to have his wife's embryo illegally implanted into his mistress, Chloe Bennet. The revelation hung in the air, sickening and monstrous. Chloe stopped screaming. Her tear-streaked face, which had been aimed at Emily, slowly turned toward Marcus. The pieces were clicking into place in her mind, forming a picture of unimaginable horror. "Marcus," she whispered, her voice cracking. What is she talking about? His wife's embryo. Marcus refused to look at her. He kept his face buried in his hands. "He used you, Miss Bennet," Sarah said, her voice softening with a cold, sharp pity. "He didn't trust you to conceive. He didn't want your child. He wanted his and Emily's child. He just needed an incubator. And you were it." The blood drained from Chloe's face. The realization was more devastating than the DNA test. She wasn't the new wife. She wasn't the mother of his child. She was the surrogate, a tool, a means to an end. The 9 months of pregnancy, the 18 hours of labor, the miracle baby. It was all a lie. He hadn't chosen her. He had used her body to carry his wife's baby. "Marcus," she said again, her voice a desperate, thin thread. "She's lying, right? Tell me she's lying. It was our miracle. You said it was ours." Marcus finally lowered his hands. His face was a ruin. He looked at her, his eyes dead. He didn't have to say a word. Chloe understood. The hatred, The shock, the denial. It all collapsed into a single, focused point of pure, white-hot rage. And it was no longer directed at Emily. "You bastard!" she spat, her voice a low growl. "You used me. You told me she was crazy. You told me it was our baby. You liar!" With a guttural scream, Chloe, still holding the baby, lunged at Marcus. She was a whirlwind of white fabric and blonde hair, her free hand clawed, aiming for his face. "I'll kill you!" "The baby!" Emily screamed, surging to her feet. The bailiffs grabbed Chloe mid-lunge, just inches from Marcus. The baby, caught in the middle, let out a terrified shriek. "Give me the child! Give me the child!" one of the officers commanded, trying to pry Chloe's arms loose. "No! He's mine! I'm the only one he knows! You can't!" Chloe wailed, her grip iron. "Your Honor," Sarah shouted, "my client is the mother. Get that baby away from her before she hurts him." "Bailiff, secure the child, now!" Judge Aniston ordered. It was a frantic, ugly struggle. Chloe was strong, fueled by a mother's desperate, if mistaken, instinct. But the officers were stronger. One officer finally managed to unhook her arms and lift the screaming, terrified baby free. The moment the child left her arms, Chloe collapsed. The fight went out of her, and she crumpled to the floor, a heap of white fabric, sobbing hysterically. "My baby. They took my baby. My baby." "Mr. Thorne," Judge Aniston said, her voice like Arctic ice. "Stand up." Marcus, trembling, slowly got to his feet. "You have been accused of conspiracy, medical fraud, and felony theft. What do you have to say for yourself?" Marcus looked at the judge, at his sobbing mistress on the floor, at the screaming baby being held by a bailiff, and at his wife. His wife, who was staring at him with nothing but a vast, empty contempt. He opened his mouth, but only one word came out. "Kincaid." "Your lawyer can't save you, Mr. Thorne," the judge said, "and neither can your money. In fact, it's only going to make it worse." She looked at Sarah. "Ms. Jenkins, you seem to have more. I suggest you share it." "Gladly, Your Honor," Sarah said. "We have a sworn affidavit from Dr. Evelyn Hayes of the Harrison Fertility Institute. It details the entire conspiracy, from the initial bribe to the illegal transfer of the embryo to Miss Bennett. Dr. Hayes is already in police custody." Kincaid, who had been standing dumbly, finally sat down. It was over. "And one more thing," Sarah said. 2 nights ago, Mr. Thorne made a phone call to a Dr. Peter Walsh, the head of Global Diagnostics. He attempted to bribe Dr. Walsh to tamper with the DNA results. He offered him $1 million to have the lab lose the sample or swap it. Unfortunately for Mr. Thorne, Dr. Walsh immediately reported the attempt to the police. "We have a recording." A gasp went through the gallery. This wasn't just a divorce. This was a criminal trial. Judge Aniston's face was purple with rage. "Marcus Thorne," she boomed, "you are a disgrace to this court. You are a monster. I am remanding you into custody. No bail." "Your Honor, you can't." Kincaid leaped up. "I just did," the judge yelled. "Bailiff, take Mr. Thorne into custody." 2 more officers moved in. They pulled Marcus's arms behind his back. The sharp click-click of handcuffs echoed in the stunned silence. The billionaire, the man who owned the city, was being arrested. "And Miss Bennett," the judge said, looking down at the weeping woman on the floor. "Get her on her feet." The bailiffs pulled Chloe up. "Your Honor, she's a victim here, too," Sarah interjected. "She was a knowing participant in a conspiracy to defraud my client and this court," Judge Aniston snapped. "She perjured herself in her affidavit. She's in contempt. Take her into custody as well. Bail set at $100,000. As the officers cuffed Chloe, her sobs turned to dull, hopeless whimpers. The fight was gone. She was just a hollowed-out girl who had made a deal with the devil and lost. The judge finally looked at the bailiff holding the crying baby. Her expression softened for the first time. "And the child?" she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Bring the baby. Bring Leo to his mother." The officer, a large man with a gentle expression, turned and walked toward Emily. Emily's hands flew to her mouth. She was shaking, her legs weak. The officer carefully, reverently, placed the warm, wailing infant into her arms. Emily looked down at his scrunched-up, tear-streaked face. He was so small, his eyes, in a moment of calm, fluttered open. They were her eyes. He instantly stopped crying. Emily clutched him to her chest, burying her face in his soft hair, inhaling his scent. Her scent. Her son. "Hello, Leo," she whispered, the tears she had held back for a year finally breaking free. "I'm your mummy. I'm so sorry it took me so long to find you." She looked up, through her tears, just in time to see Marcus Thorne, in handcuffs, being led out the courtroom door. Their eyes met one last time. He saw her, holding his son, her son. He saw the woman he had tried to destroy, victorious, and Emily. She saw nothing, just a pathetic, empty man. She turned her back on him and gave all her attention to the only thing in the world that mattered. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. The story was a media sensation, a lurid tale of wealth, betrayal, and a crime so personal it shocked the nation. The stolen embryo was splashed across every news outlet. Marcus Thorne's corporate empire, built on an image of ruthless stability, imploded overnight. His board of directors ousted him in an emergency meeting. His stock prices plummeted. The man who had everything lost it all in the time it took to read a DNA test. The criminal trial was swift. The evidence was so overwhelming, it was less a trial and more a formality. Dr. Evelyn Hayes, the disgraced director of the Harrison Fertility Institute, was the prosecution's star witness. Having already given her confession, she detailed the entire plot on the stand. She explained how Marcus had called her, desperate for an heir, and paranoid that his unstable wife would try to use the embryos against him in a divorce. He had presented it as protecting his property. The $500,000 was just a handling fee. Her testimony, delivered in a flat, defeated monotone, sealed Marcus's fate. For her cooperation and her role in multiple other fertility fraud cases, Dr. Hayes was sentenced to 7 years in a federal prison and stripped of her medical license. Chloe Bennett's trial was next. She was a shell of her former self. The bright, crimson-clad Mistress was gone, replaced by a pale, gaunt woman in a modest beige suit. Her hair returned to its natural, mousy brown. Her defense was that she, too, was a victim. Her lawyer argued that Marcus had manipulated her, telling her that Emily was unstable and that the embryo was from an anonymous donor, a way for them to start their family immediately. But the prosecution had her text messages, texts to Marcus that read, "When is the Baron Witch signing the papers? And I can't wait to see her face when she sees my baby bump." The jury had little sympathy. She was not the mastermind, but she was a willing and cruel participant. She was found guilty of conspiracy to commit fraud and perjury. However, Emily, in a move that shocked everyone, submitted a victim's impact statement on Chloe's behalf. "Ms. Bennett's cruelty to me was profound," Emily's statement read, "but she has already suffered a unique and terrible punishment. She was forced to carry and birth a child, only to have it revealed as a lie. She was used by Marcus as much as I was. She has lost her dignity, her reputation, and the child she believed was hers. I do not see the value in a long prison term. I only ask that she receive counseling and be barred from ever contacting me or my son." The judge, moved by Emily's statement, sentenced Chloe to 5 years of probation and 1,000 hours of community service. She was left broke, toxic, and a social pariah. The last Emily heard, Chloe had changed her name and was working as a waitress in a different state, haunted forever by the baby she had carried but never had. Finally, there was Marcus. His trial was a circus. He had hired a new, high-priced legal team that tried every trick in the book. They claimed Emily was a vindictive liar. They claimed Dr. Hayes was a blackmailing fraud. They claimed the DNA tests were faulty. They claimed the wire transfers were for consulting fees. It was useless. The jury was out for less than an hour. Marcus Thorne was found guilty on all counts: conspiracy, felony theft of biological material, wire fraud, perjury, and attempted witness tampering. At his sentencing, Marcus, the man who had never apologized for anything in his life, finally broke. He begged the court for mercy. He wept. He said he just wanted a son. Judge Aniston was unmoved. "Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice echoing in the packed courtroom, "you did not just want a son. You had a son, one you were preparing to raise with your wife. But that wasn't enough. You wanted power. You wanted to control every narrative. You decided to destroy one woman, your wife, and use another, your mistress, as a mere vessel. You treated human life, the very embryos you created, as commodities to be bought, sold, and stolen. You stole a mother's right to carry her own child. You stole 9 months of her son's life. It is the most calculated, cold-blooded, and personal crime I have ever presided over. The court," she declared, "sentences you to the maximum allowable by law, 20 years in state prison." The sound of the gavel was like a cannon shot. Marcus Thorne, the billionaire, collapsed. He was led away in shackles, a broken, sobbing man. Emily was there, watching from the front row. She felt no joy, no triumph, just a profound, quiet, and final sense of release. The weight of the past 5 years had finally been lifted. She stood up, walked out of the courtroom, and never looked back. 1 year later, the Thorne name was mud. The company had been broken up and sold for parts. The penthouse was seized and auctioned off to pay the dozens of lawsuits filed against his estate. Marcus Thorne, from his prison cell, was now a case study in hubris. The Harrison Fertility Institute was shut down, its license revoked. The case had sparked national outrage and led to new legislation, the Miller Act, which classified embryo theft as a major felony. But Emily Miller wasn't paying attention to any of that. She was sitting on a checkered blanket in a sun-drenched park in a new city, hundreds of miles away from the courtroom that had defined her life. The divorce was long finalized. She had received what was left of the Thorne estate, but she had put all of it into a trust. She didn't want his blood money. She had kept only one thing: her son. "Leo!" she called out, laughing. A 1-year-old boy, unsteady on his feet, giggling with delight, toddled toward her. He had his father's dark, curly hair, but he had her smile, and he had her eyes. He collapsed into her lap, all warmth and the sweet smell of apples. "Who's my good boy?" she cooed, kissing his head. Emily had sold her old life. She had taken her maiden name back. She was no longer Emily Thorne, the barren wife, or the scorned victim. She was Emily Miller, mother. She was going back to school to become a victim's advocate for fertility fraud. Her life was not a fairy tale. It was quiet, and it was simple, and it was, for the first time, completely and totally hers. She often thought about that day in court. She thought about Chloe's smirk. It was a look of such profound, arrogant ignorance. Chloe had believed that power came from a man, from money, from youth, from beauty. She thought giving birth was the victory. Emily, as she held her son and watched him try to catch a butterfly, knew the truth. Power wasn't about who held the man, or the money, or even who physically carried the child. Power was the truth, and the truth was, she was, and had always been, his mother. The DNA test hadn't made her. It had just revealed it. It had exposed the lie and brought her son home. Leo looked up at her, his face bright with unfiltered joy, and handed her a slightly crumpled daisy. "Thank you, my love," she whispered, taking the flower. She was finally free. She was finally whole. And as she looked at her son, the boy she had fought a war to reclaim, Emily Miller smiled. It was not a smirk of victory. It was a smile of peace. The story of Emily and Marcus is a terrifying look at how deep betrayal can run. It shows that sometimes the most horrific monsters are the ones sleeping in the bed next to us. Emily's fight for the truth was agonizing, but her victory in reclaiming her son, Leo, is a testament to a mother's strength. But what do you think? Was Chloe a willing villain, or was she just another victim of Marcus's monstrous plan? Should she have gone to prison, or was losing the baby she thought was hers punishment enough? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. If this story of karmic justice shocked you, please like this video and share it with someone who loves a story where the truth always comes out. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss another story of betrayal and sweet, sweet revenge.